Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker. Viva studied philosophy at McGill University, later received his law degree from Université Laval. His career began as a practicing lawyer and is now a sought-after free speech advocate. His talk today is titled Manufacturing Consent 2.0, When Fake News Has Real Power. Please welcome Viva Frei.
All right, thank you very much. Nice to see everybody here. I usually do this online, so I don't have the advantage of seeing hands up when I actually ask a question, and in the chat I say put one or two. Starting off simply, by show of hands, how many people are familiar with what is called Project Mockingbird, Operation Mockingbird? All right, not bad. Operation Northwoods. All right, very good. And then the third one was MKUltra. Everybody's heard of MKUltra? Talking about McGill in Montreal. These were, for those of you who don't know, like very summarily, Northwoods, Operation Northwoods, was a government-proposed operation by the Department of Defense to carry out acts of terrorism against American cities, American civilians, make it look like Cuba did it so you could manufacture support for a war against Cuba. MKUltra, if you don't know about this, I don't know if it originated in Montreal, but it has a good foothold in Montreal. It involved dosing people who went to brothels, prostitute houses, with LSD to see if you could actually get mind control, get them to tell the truth. It involved kidnapping, it involved torture. It was totally horrendous. And the third one, which was what we had here, we have Northwoods, Mockingbird, Mockingbird. Media infiltration, infiltrated by the CIA. Now, I'm sure you're all going to say, like, these one-offs of government unlawful conduct were three one-offs that have never repeated ever again. And I'm sure nobody says that, because it's absolutely not the case. It's continued, and it continues to this day. I presume everybody's following the news, but you've been here, so you might not have heard the news about James Comey. Not that he got indicted for allegedly leaking information from the FBI so that it could get published, so that it could shape public opinion as to how to deal with the Hillary Clinton emails back in 2016. Yesterday, he filed a motion to dismiss, and in response to the motion to dismiss, the Department of Justice filed a slew of additional documents, how he was using this guy named Dan Richman, who is a Columbia law professor, to leak to the New York Times information that would be favorable to Comey and the narrative they wanted to spin, which was absolving Hillary Clinton of any wrongdoing for the purposes of influencing the election. This is, ex-FBI leaking to the media, New York Times yet again, to manufacture consensus among the population. And if you don't know what's going on, you could be an unwitting victim of it. Another recent bit of news, when I initially drafted my speech, it was only how public opinion had swayed against, allegedly, Jay Jones, Attorney General for Virginia, who then was running to be the Attorney General, had his text scandal where he was secretly texting another Republican colleague how, it wouldn't be a terrible thing if children of Republican colleagues were getting killed, because only when they feel pain do they change policy. And when this news broke, it was a big scandal. The news was running the narrative that, public opinion is turning against Jay Jones. There was a Newsweek article that actually said 12% of respondents had a more favorable opinion of Jay Jones after the news broke of his text scandal than before. And they say only 12%. I'm like, hold on, 12%, that's 1 in 8 people who thinks more favorably of an individual who jokes about killing his colleagues, jokes about the death of his colleagues, jokes about orphaning his colleagues' families. And then yesterday, the man just got elected to Attorney General of Virginia. And the question is, how in the name of sweet holy hell did we get here? Because this is, it's not a partisan issue. I don't know anybody's leanings in here, but I can imagine based on the responses to the first questions, we're about half extremists here. That's a joke, everybody. More than half. The question is, how the heck did we get here? And the reality is, I make the joke, it's moral bankruptcy. We've entered a realm of moral and intellectual bankruptcy. And I'll tell you a bit about who I was or who I am, make more sense of what I look like today. But I used to be a practicing lawyer, and I used to do some bankruptcy law. It was kind of interesting up in Canada. And the joke in bankruptcy is it happens very slowly and then all at once. And it's the same thing of moral and intellectual bankruptcy. It's drip, drip, drip. You don't notice it's happening, and then you're electing people who ostensibly support extrajudicial assassinations and the murdering of their political rivals, and a demographic that doesn't seem to care about it. Now, so getting back to who I am, because it's, you might be saying, who the heck is this guy? If you not to stroke my ego or deflate it, how many people have ever seen a podcast that I've done or know who I was before this? That's not very many. Excellent. Well then, I didn't always used to look like this. I used to be normal. I used to have short hair, practicing attorney up in Canada, and I got red-pilled. And the red pill, like moral bankruptcy, like an awakening, happens very slowly, then all at once. And I used to practice law, being a practicing lawyer, you think that lawyers think critically, can see through the propaganda, can see through the lies, can see through the manipulation. And as we've all seen now in COVID, it's the very professionals who are the most, I won't say educated, but I'll say trained, that seem to be the most easily manipulated into this role of tyrant, based on what they think to be correct, think to be right. And my red pill started slowly, 2015, 2016, and then it happened all at once, and I'm here now trying to make sense of the media, trying to make sense of the suppression, the censorship, the stuff that I've been going through, both on what I comedically and accurately refer to as CommuTube, YouTube, and how it led to my journey into Rumble. But it was Kierkegaard who said life can only be understood backwards, yet it must be lived forwards. And when it comes to the issue of manufacturing consent, which was a Noam Chomsky book back in the day, it dealt with dated examples of the media manipulating information, lying, misinforming so as to manufacture consensus among the people. Ironically enough, Chomsky seems to have fallen victim to the very same propaganda when it came to COVID that he warned against in manufacturing consent. Living my life backwards now, I can go back to 9/11. And no, I'm not one of those, quote, extremists who thinks it didn't happen, it was holograms, whatever, nor am I one of the ones who jumps on some of the more extravagant conspiracy theories. But whether or not I believe the official narrative, nobody should believe official government narratives. But you look at how that incident was used to manipulate public opinion, to pass legislation, which led to decades of war. And I remember living through it at the time. 9/11 happened, we go to war with Afghanistan, and the immediate causal link was terrorism, Osama bin Laden, 9/11. Then they dovetail, or two-step into Iraq. And they say, well, it's not because Iraq participated in 9/11, but they've got weapons of mass destruction, and we need to go and invade. And in order to sell that to the public, they need to avail themselves of the tools that they have, which are intelligence, infiltrating media, to leak misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, in order to manipulate public opinion. And you see how they did it during 9/11. Crisis, experts, media reports, media repeats, and you've built a narrative that led to a disastrous 2-decade-long involvement in foreign conflict. But people consented to it. I remember being a useful idiot back in the day. I wasn't anywhere near as vocal about politics, because my parents always said you never talk politics or religion at parties. And the only times I've done it when I talked about, had a discussion about abortion with 6 women at a house party when I was at McGill. As my grandmother says, I did it twice. The first and the last time, because it ended in tears, because there's no way to have certain discussions with people who are potentially invested in the subject matter and have an objective, dissociated discussion about it. But I was by no means as vocal as I am today. But I remember the thought process at the time. Okay, WMDs. We've got expert reports, intelligence says we've got it. You got the media repeating it. And then, when you're in the matrix, to use the cliche, when you have not yet been red-pilled and you're sort of blue-pilled, and you think being a professional, I wasn't at the time, but you're studying philosophy, studying law, you think what makes you smart is repeating what the experts are telling you. When in reality, I would say true intelligence is sort of a skepticism to what you are being told by so-called authorities. You only learn that after the fact, and you've got to revisit everything. And so I remember saying, okay, yeah, we got to go get Iraq, WMDs. Then they go in. They can't find the WMDs, so they move the goalposts. Oh, well, they were shooting Scud missiles at Israel. That technically qualifies as the WMDs, so even though we misled you on the WMDs, it was still justified. And then, 2 decades later, basically everyone admits it was an abject disaster based on misinformation that was peddled as information, repeated by the media, to manufacture a consent of support of that intervention. And then you go and you look at things like the 2015-2016 election, which is where I got thoroughly red-pilled. I won't use the analogy of the method of delivery of the red pill, but it was involuntary, to say the least. And you realize they do the exact same thing over and over and over again. Mutatis mutandis, applied as warranted to fit the circumstances. So you have Russia collusion, expert reports, leaks to the media repeating, manufacturing consent. Then the next crisis we had was, we had COVID. And then you had the media coming out, repeating the expert reports, doom and gloom. Repeat over and over again, and you will manufacture consent. Then you have the January 6th insurrection, which people still call an insurrection, despite all evidence to the contrary, because that memory of truth is ingrained in us. Now, I've had Alex Jones on the channel a number of times, and I go on InfoWars regularly. And one of the things he told me the first time he came on, and it's stuck with me ever since, is that he said in his voice, he goes, you know, Viva, they have the same tactic over and over again. What's surprising me is everyone falls for it over and over again. And like, I totally understood it at that point. And it's like they use the same tactics, mutatis mutandis, and what you have is sort of a generational, not lack of awareness, a generational amnesia. So I've also been like viral videos on the internet. You could look my name, you'll see some funny stuff. Best one ever is when I use a drone to catch a smallmouth bass in Quebec. It's called drone bass fishing. Look it up. It still makes me happy to watch that video to this day. What I notice on the internet is that videos go viral, like almost on a 7-year cycle, say give or take 5, 7, 10 years, because one generation which went viral with it rises, falls, or leaves the market, and a new generation comes in, and if it went viral the first time, it's because it tapped into some human emotion, some innate human emotion that is common among all humans. The next generation comes in, and you have these spikes in videos, subject matter that goes viral. And that's what makes sense about what Alex Jones said about them using the same tactics over and over again is, to put it crassly, a generation dies off, the ignorant generation that hasn't experienced it comes into that and is not aware of the tricks. And so now this is going right back to the beginning, where you're looking at me and you're at a financial investment conference looking at a raving lunatic talking about MK Ultra, Northwoods, and a mockingbird, and you say, what the heck is this all about? And there my Canadian accent just came out. It is about, you're here, presumably, you want to learn about finances so that you can achieve a certain degree of financial autonomy. My mission, or at least what has become my mission, has been imposed on me, is to make sure that people have the intellectual autonomy to be ungovernable and to read through the nonsense. And it takes a little bit of practice. Once you get it, you will never lose it. I forget who said it. It's a Japanese proverb. Once you see the way broadly, you see it in all things. And once you understand how they do it, you'll never forget until you are no longer of the generation that needs to remember. But then the duty is to teach those who don't yet know so they can look for it. When I say, crisis, experts, media reports, media repeats, and it becomes truth. When I studied philosophy, I took a class called Philosophy of Jazz with a professor named Eric Lewis, who's still there. I looked him up to make sure. He used to play Frisbee with my wife. And I took the class thinking it was going to be like a bogus class, easy to get an A, and I didn't get a very good grade in it, probably because I told him, and I shouldn't say this in New Orleans, but I don't really like jazz. I love blues. I love blues. I don't very much love jazz, specifically because it's non-linear and doesn't have a repetitive pattern that you can relate to. The theory of the class was pop music, and at least this is the theory as far as I remember it. I might have made it better or worse over the years. Pop music is not popular because people like it. It's popular because it's been popularized. You've been ingrained to like it. You've been ingrained through repetition, through familiarity, to like it. Nobody likes Taylor Swift's Shake It Off, but you've heard it so many times. Maybe, okay, look, I did a video to that once upon a time. It's a good, catchy song. It's a good, catchy song because it catches something in you, because you relate to it, you're familiar with it, because you've heard it on the radio all day, every day, multiple times a day. You see it on the news, you see it at sports games. And the theory of philosophy of jazz is nobody likes pop music. They make you like it through conditioning, through repetition. And my wife is a neuroscientist. Anybody who watches the channel knows this. It's the Ben Shapiro joke, my wife is a doctor. My wife is a neuroscientist, and I think she can kick Ben Shapiro's wife's butt. That's a joke. But she says there's an actual neurological, neuroscientific reason for why this happens, where when you learn something, it becomes difficult to unlearn. Where when things make you feel familiar, you tend to like them more than things that you're not accustomed to. Songs that you haven't yet heard, songs that you don't know, that you don't associate with something. You're more familiar with it, you get to like it more, it becomes part of you even if you don't want it to. And to some extent, the same is true of the truth, where you learn something and it becomes ingrained in you. You become conditioned to believe that it's reality. And then even when you learn that it's not, it causes a certain degree of cognitive dissonance, but a certain degree of discomfort where you refuse to believe that it isn't true, because that would involve undoing what you've programmed within yourself that made you feel comfortable with yourself, comfortable with your positions, and comfortable socially. And so once you understand that that's what's going on in the media, and that's what's going on with the truth that they feed you, you will never be able to unsee it. I wanted to say, there were only a few things that I wanted to write down so that I don't misquote them, because I'm notoriously bad. Dialogue is the battle of the personality of ideas. If anybody in the crowd knows who said it, you gotta let me know. I Googled it, and it's sort of like attribution unknown. Dialogue is the battle of the personality of ideas. When it comes to the government, and when it comes to those who exercise control over you, and unfortunately that is what government does. If government doesn't govern, it's not government anymore. And that's precisely why they want to keep control over people. If they have no subjects to govern, they have no raison d'etre. They no longer have a purpose for being there. But if they no longer govern validly, well, then they're no longer government either. Then they're terrorists. And so the government doesn't like the personality of ideas being debated. Coming out of COVID, when you saw, what's her face, Jacinda Ardern, saying, if you want information, you come to the government. Don't go to these nutbags who have been exponentially more accurate than all of us. You come to the government, we'd tell you the truth. They don't want the battle of the personality of ideas. And that is specifically and precisely where censorship comes into play, but when they can't do overt censorship, they do discreet censorship, which is having their moles leak truth to the media, which makes it truth in the minds of those who read it, repeat it, and then come to believe it. And censorship is the tool of tyrants. The only thing that challenges a tyrant is independence, the autonomy of the individual, of the subject. I haven't gotten through it. It's like a book, an audio book that's almost as long as the Bible. It's Jordan Peterson's We Who Wrestle with God. And he's talking about tyrants and what makes them tyrants, and how the greatest threat to the tyrant is the independence of the individual. And that is what government is. Government is a necessary evil that should be kept to the absolute smallest in as much as possible, but it doesn't mean you give that absolute smallest government any leeway in terms of what is lawful tyranny. And they impose censorship. They want to suppress the free exchange of ideas. I mean, everybody loves free speech until they're in a position of power where everyone else is using the free speech to challenge their reign at the top or their power, and that's basically what government is. And in as much as you have controlled opposition, people say they love freedom of speech until they get into that position of power. But in order to read through the media lies and how you're being manipulated so they don't play the games on you, you just run that test. Crisis, expert, media report, media repeats. And the crisis, as I was writing this, I realized the crisis, which I almost gloss over, is the most important thing. I presume a lot of people in the crowd have kids, and I think I even see some kids, although they look old here. Everybody's got, well, who's got kids? You're not a kid anymore. You look old enough to be not a kid, but you want to, okay, you're young. Anybody with kids, and the younger the better, because it's a good test. It's not, you want to see a kid make a bad decision, watch them in a position of panic. And nobody makes good decisions out of panic. Well, I say not nobody, but it takes training. It takes training to take a deep breath to back up and not be manipulated or make a rash decision in a state of panic. All of these manipulations, manufacturing of consent, originate from a point of panic, real or manufactured. Like Gulf of Tonkin manufactured or real. COVID manufactured, and I don't say COVID doesn't exist, I just personally happen to believe that COVID might have been a rebranding of a bad flu season that they then decided to say, we can now weaponize this into total panic so that we can implement contact tracing, digital life, total surveillance, lockdowns. I came in Quebec. In Quebec, we were locked in our homes, house arrest for 5 months. And people tolerated it. People promoted it. In Ontario, I covered these at length. They were telling people to lock up their kids, 10 days of quarantine, if they crossed paths with someone who tested positive for COVID. You whip people up into a frenzy of panic, terror, life or death, you'll get them to do anything, especially when the guys with and gals with the white lab coats are telling you to do it. And then the media tells you to do it. And then your neighbor tells you to do it. And so once you understand this method, and once you understand how they do it, crisis, expert, report, repeat, you'll see it everywhere. You might end up seeing it in places where it doesn't actually exist. But it's good to have the skepticism as opposed to the blind obedience. And so in as much as financial independence is also what a government doesn't like, they don't want to allow you to make transactions without their constant surveillance, increasingly lower levels of microtransaction surveillance. The government doesn't want you to be financially independent, but they don't want you to be intellectually independent. So in as much as you're here trying to gain financial autonomy so that you can be financially ungovernable, exercise critical thought so that you can be intellectually ungovernable. And I swear a lot more on the internet, so if you want to check that out, it's Viva Frei. But this is the idea. Once you see it, once you know what they're doing, it makes it more difficult for them to get away with it the next time. And when you impart it on the new generation, it's going to make it more difficult for them to get away with it the first time. Thank you very much.